nobody out.
Fly ball, deep center field, Borges. A slicing drive, watches it way for the yard.
Gregory Halman went from a Dutch teenage prodigy signed by 7 major league teams to a rising star dead at 24, killed by his own brother. After signing with Seattle for $130,000 and hitting 74 minor league home runs, his promise was cut short. This isn't just a tragedy. It's the story of a baseball family destroyed, a shocking acquittal, and a sport that lost its brightest star. Born on August 27, 1987 in Harlem, Greg grew up in a household where the sport was absolute law. His father, Eddie, was a former professional player born in Aruba who played for the Dutch national team. Eddie passed this relentless passion to Greg and his younger brother, Jason. Greg started playing baseball at 3 years old, living by a strict family slogan: baseball is life. By age 16, while his peers focused on school at Mendel College, Greg was playing in the Dutch Houtklasse, the highest professional league for Kinheim. In his rookie 2003 season, his raw speed was on display as he led the league in triples. The next year, Greg took his game to a level that left scouts speechless. He batted .357, leading the league in runs batted in with 41, and hit for the cycle on May 15th against Sparta Feyenoord. For his efforts, he was named Houtklasse MVP and won the Ron Fraser Award as the top junior player in the Netherlands, drawing massive international attention. Naturally, Major League scouts could no longer ignore this European prodigy. 7 MLB teams entered a fierce bidding war to secure his services. Greg initially signed with the Minnesota Twins, but had that contract dissolved at his request. That's when the Seattle Mariners stepped in with a lucrative offer of $130,000. He trusted Mariners scouts Peter Van Dalen, Wayne Norton, and Bob Engel, choosing them over a contract he had voided, ready to prove his skills in America. Standing 6'4" and weighing 210 pounds, Greg was a physical marvel who spoke 4 languages fluently: Dutch, English, Spanish, and Papiamento. He grew up speaking Dutch and English, but taught himself Spanish in 2005 to communicate with Latin American teammates, believing a true leader should speak the languages of the game. This social intelligence and raw athletic ability immediately made him a fan favorite in the United States. His ascent through the Mariners minor league system was rapid. In 2006, playing for Everett, he hit .259 with 5 home runs before a fractured right hand cut his season short. In 2007, he showcased massive power potential by hitting 20 home runs combined for Everett and Single-A Wisconsin, although he struck out 162 times. In 2008, Greg launched 29 home runs and fanned his way through the minors while stealing 31 bases, earning Mariners Minor League Player of the Year honors. Baseball America rated him the best power hitter and athlete in the Seattle organization. To keep climbing, he actually turned down a spot on the Netherlands 2008 Olympic team. By 2010, he blasted 33 home runs for AAA Tacoma, leading his team to the Pacific Coast League title. But beneath the flashy home runs and stolen bases, a massive problem was brewing that scouts simply couldn't solve. Greg's power was real, and his speed was elite, but his contact was broken. In 2009, he hit just .210 at AA West 10 with 183 strikeouts, the worst mark in the Southern League. At the MLB level in 2011, he fanned in 1 out of every 3 plate appearances. He went hitless in 19 consecutive plate appearances before being optioned back to Tacoma. The tools were undeniable, but the bat-to-ball contact never came. He finally reached the major leagues. Hit his first home run on June 15, 2011 against the Angels. He hit his second on July 19th against the Blue Jays. That was the last hit of his career. But the question isn't what stopped him on the field, it's what happened 8 weeks after his final MLB game. When his 2011 Major League season ended in August, Greg returned to the Netherlands. But he didn't return just to rest. He wanted to give back to the country that raised him. In November 2011, he joined the European Big League Tour organized by Baltimore Orioles pitcher Rick Vandenherk.
We love to do it, and it's all for them.
The group included baseball stars like Bobby Bonilla and Adam Jones, conducting youth clinics across the Netherlands, the Czech Republic, and Italy. For young kids in Europe, seeing a hometown hero who plays for the Seattle Mariners teach them how to play was a life-changing experience. Greg was absolutely mobbed for autographs by Dutch kids everywhere they went. Rick Vandenherk, who had known Greg since Greg was 7 years old, said they spent 24 hours a day together on the tour, sharing meals and stories. Greg flew back to Rotterdam from Italy on November 13th, completely energized by the kids' passion. Greg and his younger brother Jason shared an apartment building in Rotterdam. Their bond was incredibly deep, with their Kinheim coach Alco Janssen describing them as completely inseparable. Jason, 22, played catcher for Kinheim, the exact club where Greg had started his professional career. Jason was a phenomenal athlete, batting .333 with 20 doubles and 32 RBIs during his stellar 2011 season. Others even had matching tattoos, a cross with the initials G and J between their shoulder blades. Coach Janssen remarked that Gregory took care of his little brother and Jason really looked up to him, adding that Greg hadn't changed at all after becoming a major leaguer. They were each other's biggest supporters. But beneath this public display of brotherly love, a quiet, dark storm was brewing. In the days leading up to that November, the emotional pressure on Jason was mounting. According to Wright Thompson's reporting for ESPN's Outside the Lines, there was a quiet, suffocating tension building between the brothers. Exactly 17 days before the tragedy, Jason drove Greg to a hotel near the Amsterdam train station. Greg wanted Jason as his +1 for the kickoff dinner of the European Big League Tour, an event they had happily attended together a year earlier. But during that car ride, Jason did something he had never done. He said no. For the first time in their lives, Jason refused to go. He was feeling unheard, isolated, and overwhelmed. More alarmingly, Greg had recently told family and friends that Jason had started complaining of hearing voices in his head. As Greg traveled on the European tour, Jason was left alone with those escalating voices. To cope with the overwhelming mental pressure, Jason turned heavily to cannabis. He had no idea that he was pouring fuel onto an active psychological fire. This brings us to the devastating morning of November 21st, 2011. Greg was staying in an apartment unit directly above Jason's in Rotterdam. In the early morning hours, around 5 a.m., Greg went downstairs to Jason's apartment to complain about loud music. An argument started. What happened next ended in a single fatal stab wound to Greg's carotid artery. Rotterdam police received the first call at 5:34 a.m. They found Greg bleeding on the floor, but officers and paramedics were unable to save him.
Seattle Mariners outfielder Greg Halman was stabbed to death early Monday in Rotterdam, Netherlands.
He was just 24 years old. Jason was arrested in the street nearby, covered in blood. Jason Halman was arrested and charged with manslaughter. The case should have been simple. A man was dead. His brother was covered in blood at the scene. But the Dutch justice system was about to conclude something that almost no one expected. And that reframed the entire night. For Jason Halman, his future was placed in the hands of the Peter Bond Psychiatric Assessment Center, the primary forensic psychiatric facility in the Netherlands. For months, team after team of clinical psychiatrists and psychologists evaluated Jason, dissecting his mental history, his drug use, and his state of mind on that horrific night. The final unanimous decision sent shockwaves through the legal community. On the night of November 21st, Jason Halman was in a state of acute psychosis. The clinical psychosis was determined to have been induced, in part, by his heavy cannabis use. Because of his profound break from reality, the experts concluded that Jason could not be held criminally accountable for his actions taken while psychotic. Dutch law, like many legal systems, doesn't hold a person criminally responsible for acts committed during a state of true psychosis. That standard isn't a loophole. It's a legal recognition that accountability requires the capacity for voluntary control, and psychosis removes it entirely. On August 16, 2012, 9 months after Greg's death, Dutch prosecutors took the rare step of siding with Jason's defense attorneys and joining their call for acquittal. Jason was granted provisional release from custody while the final verdict was prepared. On August 30th, 2012, the Rotterdam District Court officially delivered its verdict. Jason Halman was formally acquitted. The court's written statement declared that Jason was in a state of psychosis at the time of the stabbing and could therefore not be held accountable. Furthermore, the psychiatric assessments concluded that there is only a remote chance of any reoccurrence, stating the psychosis may have been a singular event. Jason was allowed to walk free. He agreed to supervision by a probation officer and voluntary mental health treatment. But what does cannabis-induced psychosis actually mean? Is it just a convenient legal loophole? In reality, it's a well-documented acute psychiatric condition where a person completely loses contact with reality, often experiencing terrifying auditory or visual hallucinations. Unlike general intoxication, psychosis involves a complete break from voluntary control. Wright Thompson's reporting for ESPN's Outside the Lines revealed the heavy emotional pressure and the painful feelings of being unseen that Jason had been carrying. In a car ride leading up to that night, Jason spoke about feeling completely unheard by his brother. What happened was not premeditated. It was a tragic mental health crisis. Jason Halman walked free. He later returned to play baseball for the Netherlands national team. The question left behind isn't whether the verdict was right. It's what it means that a life ended this way and that Dutch baseball, a sport who had finally started to produce major leaguers, lost the one who made everyone believe it was possible. On November 29, 2011, thousands of people gathered at Westerveld Cemetery in Driehaus to bid farewell to Greg Halman. In a deeply emotional tribute, Greg was buried wearing his Seattle Mariners uniform, a final testament to the dream he had fought so hard to turn into reality. His teammates, coaches, and fans stood in stunned silence as his family laid him to rest. They chose a specific burial plot nestled in a small grove of trees near the North Sea. If you look at the plot from a distance, the family noticed it was shaped almost exactly like a baseball diamond. At just 24 years old, Greg became only the second Major League Baseball player ever known to have died in the Netherlands. The entire baseball world mourned his loss. Major League Baseball Commissioner Bud Selig expressed his profound sorrow, while MLB Players Association Executive Director Michael Weiner issued a heartfelt statement praising Greg's passion for the game and his tireless work in sharing that passion with kids across Europe. In June 2012, the short-season Everett Aqua Sox formally retired his number 26, ensuring that his legacy would forever overlook the field where he once dominated. His childhood Dutch club, Kinheim, also retired his number 26. But perhaps the most painful tribute came from his sports agent, Mike Nicotera, who released a devastatingly simple two-word statement: "This hurts." Yet, as the tears dried, a glaring, uncomfortable truth began to emerge. One that points to a massive systemic failure in professional sports. Greg Halman spent the final weeks of his life flying across 3 European countries on his own time, using his hard-earned success to build a future for baseball in Europe. But while Major League Baseball is structured when it comes to tracking batting averages, what was it doing to track the mental well-being of its players when they return home? No system existed to monitor the severe emotional pressure a Dutch family was facing when one brother's career stalled and the other was quietly struggling. The devastating warning signs of Jason's emotional pressure and his painful feelings of being unseen were heavily documented after the tragedy. Greg Halman never got to find out if he would have fixed his strikeouts. He never got to find out if Dutch baseball would eventually follow in his footsteps. He got a November morning, an argument over music, and a death that made no sense. The sport lost a player who was still becoming one. To our amazing supporters who contribute through Super Thanks, thank you so much. If stories like this are what you came here for, please subscribe, because these are the powerful human narratives that simply don't get told anywhere else. We appreciate your incredible support on this journey for more upcoming videos.